Something's gotta turn out right.
And I love that, and it was wide open, and I love the wide open stuff and these big roads and all that kind of stuff. So what the heck, let's move out there and see if I can make something happen and reinvent myself out here, you know. And I found out after a couple of years of living here in Arizona that there is not much of a music scene out here. I mean, they had a couple of big bands that came from Arizona and still live here, you know, like Rob Halford of Judas Priest. He lives out here now, and gosh, Dave Ellefson of Megadeth, bass guy, he lives out here, and you see him from time to time. You know, and they come by the Star Worldwide studio from time to time, and Nils Lofgren lives here, and I'll be damned about that guy, Nils Lofgren. It's like you hear his name and you see it in print, and everybody writes about him. He's a darling of the Rolling Stone magazine, at least back in the day, anyway. But I never knew anything that he did. I don't know what he does to this day. Nils Lofgren, yeah, he's a and I associate him with Bruce Springsteen. I guess he wrote songs, and I don't know. He's just one of those guys. It's like he's a rock guy, but I don't know what he does. You know, and Gin Blossoms live out here, and you see them come and they do shows from time to time, and they're great. You know, and Alice Cooper, of course, big guy. He's a big, you know, community guy here in Arizona, and a couple of restaurants he owns, and you see him doing stuff from time to time. And he's a great teacher, and he works teen centers, and he's just fabulous and big golfer. And he did a show with me one night back in the early 90s. You know, hello, you trashers and trashettes. It's Bob the Blade on 106.1 WRDU. You know, I think he had an album called Trash, or that's what it was, out of the time. But and he had this one saying, and I always think of this. He said, "Life is just an AA meeting and a round of golf." And all the things he's done, I always just think of that. And he's a fabulous guy, really. Who else lives out here? Gosh, Meat Puppets live out here, you know. And I hear from time. I think is it Limp Bizkit or one of those bands that kind of has a house out here in Gilbert or something like that. But you know, I got to thinking about some of the weird moments that have come across my studio over the years from rock guys, uncomfortable moments and maybe weird moments and all that. And one of the ones I wrote about in the book, There's Nothing Louder Than Dead Air, and I always remember this, but it's not the weirdest one, and it was Chris Robinson, and they had come by in 1990 when they'd first come out with, I think Shake Your Moneymaker was their first album, I think it was, and they just come out and they came by to do an acoustic thing like the band started to do in the late 80s or the 90s, and they did She Talks to Angels, and it was great, and I was wowed and floored and mesmerized and dumbfounded, astounded, amused, bemused. And when it was over, I said, "Damn, guys, thanks a lot. It was awesome." And then Chris Robinson walks out of the room, and he's just walking around the station with his hand in his, you know, head in his hands. He's like, "God, that just sucked." What? What? Oh, God. One of the weirdest moments I've ever gone through, you know. And to me, he's like a hero to me. To me, this is my statement on the Black Rose. It's the last great band to come out, and that was 1990. There's been a lot of good bands that have come out since then, but that was the last great band to come out, and they're still great in the Chris Robinson Brotherhood. I love those guys and that jam scene. That's what I love about Raleigh so much, is they love that. And I did the 420 Smoke Break back in the day, and I'd try to play these 15-minute jams from Dave Matthews Band, you know, or Fish, and program directors, "You're not going to do that, are you?" You know, that whole thing. You know, and another time I had come into the studio to do an interview with Dennis Miller, and he was in the studio waiting for me. I guess he'd gotten there a little early, which is odd, and I came in like a minute late, and my first song was playing. It was always Night Flight by the Zeppelin, and he was in there waiting for me to come in, and it had started, and or else I'd left the band to go to do something, probably to fire up, you know, and then come back. And he was in there waiting for me, and I walked in and I said, "Dennis, how's it going?" And he said, "Where do you get off? Where do you?" And I didn't know if he was kidding or serious. It was really, really weird. And I was like, I don't know what he means. You know, I just don't know what he means. And then, you know, and it's okay, and you get a Night Flight ends, Zeppelin, you go on and do the, you know, turn on the mics, and then he goes right into his showbiz act, you know, the big words and the funny, you know, analyzations that he does, and it was great. But it was that one moment that was the weirdest moment. And then, you know, the other weird thing, and these are all things that pop into your head. There's a billion that I can't remember, but these are the ones that pop into your head. So that must make them the greatest if they're the ones that you remember. And Edie Brickell of the New Bohemians, "What I Am Is What I," it's a good song and a nice little guitar in that. And she married Paul Simon. Don't know if they're still married, probably not. And they had come by to do a show at a hotel. No, I forget where the show was, but we gone to watch. I think it was the Raleigh Pier, honestly, and in Mission Valley, and they did a show there, and then they had a meetup, I guess, at some hotel in a banquet room, and a bunch of record geeks and radio people, and a bunch of ticket winners and contest winners, and all that kind of stuff showed up, and Edie Brickell was there, and she's very pretty and really short, and everybody watched her and everybody talked to her, and it occurred to me when I walked out of that event, she didn't say one word. Not a single word. Didn't say one single word. I watched her. All she did was nod her head for 2 hours, and that's it. And that was the end of the day. Really weird. Didn't want to play the game or talk to people. Didn't care. But to me, and this happened 8 times probably in the course of 22 years at WRDU. And it was this comedian, Jeff Dunham, and he would come by and he would bring Walter or his puppets, or maybe he has other ones, I don't know, and he's this big guy, and he sold out shows all weekend at the comedy club at Charlie Goodnight's, and he'd come by with his puppet. And how's a puppet going to work on a radio? 8 times he'd come by and he talked like Walter, Walter is angry, and I couldn't laugh because it wasn't funny, and nice person, and none of the jokes were funny, and to this day I still don't get Jeff Dunham, and to this day I see him doing HBO specials and these television specials with packed houses, concert halls, sometimes even stadiums. Jeff Dunham is doing these things. And for all of my, let's say, 22 to 30 years in radio broadcasting, the most awkward, weirdest moments of all time were the 8 times Jeff Dunham came by to do. And it was like Steve Reynolds always said, and he would always say this when he'd had people on the air that didn't quite do, whatever, and he'd say, "Gosh, so little to talk about, so much time." Okay, thanks, Jeff.